Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of r/malicious compliance. Boss says if you're 1 minute late, I'm docking 15 minutes from your time. Gets mad when I don't work the 15 minutes I was docked for free. This happened about 4 years ago. I do construction and we start fairly early. Boss got tired of people walking in at 6:05 or 6:03 when we start at 6 o'clock, even though he was a few minutes late more consistently than any one of us were. So he said, if you aren't standing in front of me at 6 o'clock when we start, then I'm docking 15 minutes from your time for the day. The next day I accidentally forgot my tape measure in my car and had to walk back across the job site to grab it. Made it inside at 6 o'clock. Boss chewed me out and told me he was serious yesterday and docked me 15 minutes. So I took all my tools off right there and sat down on a bucket. He asked why I wasn't getting to work and I said I'm not getting paid until 6:15, so I'm not doing any work until 6:15. I enjoy what I do, but I don't do it for free. He tried to argue with me about it until I said, if you're telling me to work without paying me, then that's against the law. You really want to open the company and yourself up to that kind of risk? Maybe I'm the kind to sue, maybe I'm not, but if you keep on telling me to work after you dock my time, then we're gonna find out one way or the other. He shut up pretty quickly after that, and everyone else saw me do it and him cave, so now they weren't gonna take his crap either. Over the next few days, guys that would have been 1 or 2 minutes late just texted the boss, hey, sorry boss. Would have been there at 6:02 and gotten docked, so I'll see you at 6:15 and I'll get to work then, and then sat in their cars until 6:15 and came in when their time started. So between people doing what I did or just staying in their cars instead, he lost a ton of productivity and morale because he decided that losing 15 minutes of productivity per person and feeling like a big man was better than losing literally 1 or 2 minutes of productivity. Even though everyone stands around crapping and getting material together for the day until about 6:10 anyway. After a few weeks of that, he got chewed out by his boss over the loss of productivity and how bad the doc timesheets were looking and reflecting poorly on him as a leader because we were missing deadlines over it, and it showed that he doesn't know how to manage his people. And then suddenly his little self-implemented policy was gone and we all worked like we were supposed to and caught back up fairly quickly. Workers' solidarity for the win. Not one person took his crap and worked that time for free after he tried to swing his weight around on them. But obviously I was a target after that and only made it 2 more months before he had stacked up enough crap reasons to get away with firing me when I called in a few days in a row after my mom fell and I took off work to take care of her and monitor her for a while during the day. Next story. Don't care about people calling me on your old number? I'll sort it. This was about 10 years ago, also English is my second language. I had just moved to Australia and gotten a new phone, but as it turns out my number was someone else's old number. Every other week I'd get calls by a trotty who wanted to know why I wasn't on site, mate, or what I wanted done with building project ABC. Every time I explained at length that they got the wrong number, and quite often folks on the other end were absolute rude or thought I was taking the piss and insist I answered their questions or show up on site. Now, I was over it, so I googled my own number and did some digging and eventually found out the guy who had my number before, then his new number, and then I called him. I politely explained my dilemma, pointed out that there were 2 websites still having his old, my now new, number, and if he could please change this and let his contacts know about his new number and to delete the old one as it was getting quite tedious for me. By that time I had used my number for work, visa applications and landlords and friends, and changing it would have been a huge pain. I explained all of that. Well, of course he was just as pleasant as most of his contacts and told me something along the lines of I don't give F, mate, that's not my effing problem. Get F, sort your own shot out, mate. Well, the universe provides, and so I got a great opportunity to do just that only a few weeks later. I received a call in the early hours of one morning by another disgruntled guy telling me he was early and demanding to know where I wanted the sand put down and how to get in. I asked what sand and was told he had a full truckload of sand as ordered and no one was on site and it was all fenced off. Very briefly did I think about launching into my explanation, but I was tired and over it and then realized the opportunity provided. I snapped back at him with no uncertainty, mate, it's all good, dump it all right in the driveway, front of the fence, we'll sort it out when we get there. The guy said, you sure mate? It's a lot of sand. Me, absolutely sure mate, thanks a lot him, alright then boss, and hangs up. Well, I go back to bed, snoozing for another hour with a big smile until my phone rings again and I see it's old mate with his new number who I had saved when I called him a few weeks ago. I pick up rather chipper, and he doesn't waste any time launching into a series of swear words and how he has no access to the site and that he has to move a literal ton of sand by hand and whether or not I told the sand guy to dump it all there. I replied, "You told me to sort this out myself, this is me sorting this out. You can remove the numbers and let your contacts know or not. Totally up to you, mate." He was fuming, called me a few more choice words, promising to find me and a lot more before we ended the conversation. However, the numbers disappeared from the internet really quickly after that and I never got another call again. I still have my number and every time I see a truck with sand I chuckle to myself thinking of this guy moving a ton of sand by hand and losing a fair few hours of labor because he was a douchebag and couldn't be bothered sending a few texts. Next story. The principal of the school asked everyone to be 30 minutes early for the exam. 30 or so hours of overtime were paid, and she had to monitor students herself. I'm not a native English speaker, I apologize if I make mistakes. I'm a teacher. The principal we had at our school was the kind who got to this position because it was a way to escape teaching students. She was a teacher before taking the exam to be principal, which is common, and to flaunt the little authority it got her. One of the issues I had with her was about punctuality. She was especially a hard but about it, which would have been fine if she weren't herself systematically late to everything. I loathe hypocrites, and it makes our job especially difficult to ask students to be on time at classes when the principal was half an hour late at a meeting she scheduled herself with their parents. Come the end of year and with it, time for the baccalaureate, final exam of high school. The students start to receive their convocations for the exam week. When we see their convocations, we're already pissed because the time is wrong, on purpose. It would tell a student they have to be there at 7:30 for a 4-H test, without even telling them the test is actually scheduled to start at 8 o'clock and ends at 12 o'clock. A few days later, the teachers received their own convocations to monitor the tests. It's usual to get them after the students, though it was particularly late this year. For us, the scheduled time of the test is correct, but it was mentioned on each of our convocations that we had to be present 30 minutes before the start of each test. I mean, we aren't going to be present at 8 o'clock exactly if the test is scheduled to start at that time. We don't want to screw the students over. We need a few minutes to get the test papers and let the students in the classroom so that we can start exactly on time. But 5 minutes is enough, 10 at most. And as teachers, we are used to being there slightly before class starts anyway. Most of us simply ignored her and came to the exam on time as usual. But a dozen of us decided to comply and we sent her emails tallying up the total number of hours we'd be working that week, adding that half hour before each test. She answered some crap that our tallies were wrong because she wasn't counting the half hour. We let that pass, we complied, and my colleagues declared their overtime. In the end, that came to about 30 hours of overtime total for doing jack crap that had to be paid. She also did not seem to realize that my email was slightly different than that of my colleagues. Me, that's a bit different, because I work part-time. As such, I'm not allowed to do overtime. The reason for that is because both part-time and overtime are paid more than regular hours, so it has to be either or. Comes Friday. I sent a new email, reminding her about the upcoming issue. No answers. The last 4-hour test of the week starts at 1300 hours. At 14:25, I asked my colleague monitoring the next room over, who was in on the plan, to cover for me for 5 minutes. There's a door between the exam rooms, we can stand there and watch both rooms to let the other take a bathroom break or something like that. I go to the principal's office. I remind her that there is a room full of students with 2 hours 30 minutes left and I don't know if she's scheduled someone to take over for me, but I've already done all my hours for this week and since I'm not allowed to do overtime, I'm leaving. Now, as a teacher, I take pride in my punctuality and my ability to finish my speech exactly on time. I also purposefully timed this one. Just after I told her I was leaving, I look at my watch, it's 3 seconds to 14:30. I look at her face while she gathers her thoughts. In 3 seconds, she went from confusion, to realization, to anger, and just as she's about to answer, it's time, so I turn around and walk away. What are you doing? Stay here. We're not finished. I answer without looking back, sorry, it's 14:30. My work is done. I'm not being paid to listen to you. I leave while I hear her half-coherent threats. She followed me, of course, but couldn't really talk loudly in the corridors while the exam was taking place. Plus, she still knows that loudly berating a teacher in public in full view and hearing of students would be extremely unprofessional, and she's the one who'd get in trouble for that. More importantly, I know where I'm going. I pass in front of the classroom I was monitoring in earlier. I thank my colleague, points at the principal who's just catching up, red as a beet, and tell him, I brought you the principal. I leave as he greets her, thus intercepting her for me. I learned that she had to monitor the students herself, which must have pissed her off something fierce, because she leaves early on Fridays. Next week, obviously, she requested that we had a talk in her office. I went with my union representative. We explained to her that it was not difficult to prove that she was the one in the wrong and that if she wanted to escalate the issue, we would have no problem getting it to the administrative tribunal. My union representative also made the open threat of a strike, that I and those who declared their overtime had the support of the union and teaching staff. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel or posts.